several clergy
Was the Pope appealing for peace, or was he praying for peace?
And the same applies to the Carry Ungrad.
Yeah, that's a good question. So what do you have to say about that, guys? Folks, we have a good turnout, a large number of members of the team on the show tonight, but there's one missing. Poor Frank fell and died on Thursday. And I want to say a few words and dedicate this show to him, because when I first started using social media and I saw the term Facebook friend, I inwardly scoffed. I thought, that's a misuse of the word friend. Some random person you've met online cannot possibly be a real friend. I was wrong. I met Frank. Frank was so obviously a lovely guy. We were kindred spirits. We shared a mission to promote rationalism and critical thinking. He had been active in his Kentucky locality for years and had met key players such as the late Dwayne Gish and Ken Ham, who launched the Ark Encounter and Answers in Genesis Museum in nearby to Louisville. Part of the reason that I make shows like this is because of the encouragement of people like Frank. He wanted to get involved and was a guest on Free Thought Hour and became a regular panelist on Views on the News, this show. So Free Thought Channel has become like a family for me, and I will miss Frank enormously. Right. The news continues to come in, I'm afraid. And the nature of it is not usually very positive. So let's get it.
Could I add something to that?
Sure, please do.
It's something good to see other atheists in the South. We don't have an opportunity to know each other very well because there's a lot of stigma around it, particularly in this environment. But if there's one thing I liked about Frank is that he's always made me feel very comfortable and speaking out about my thoughts to a welcoming audience. And it's good to have a welcoming audience. And so in memory of him, I'm going to make sure that to celebrate his life and the work that he does, that I'm going to continue to do the work that I'm doing and encourage other people to speak out and speak up when they need to about matters of dogma and needless harm and skepticism and free thinking that we celebrate here in this podcast. So thank you, Frank, and let's continue the good work. I think we're doing a good job here.
I'd like to add something too. John, I would like to start by saying that I was also in the past very skeptic about Facebook friends, but I've met the most incredible people via my online connections. I've had the privilege of meeting you in person, and I always hoped that Frank and his family, or at least his wife, would be able to come out to South Africa and visit us, because every invitation that I offer is a real, it's not a joke. And it's funny that when we have these panel discussions, if somebody's not there because they're busy or they couldn't make it, you miss them, but they're still there. And when I heard about Frank's passing, and I realized that tonight we will have to look at the screen and Frank won't be there, but he won't be there. He will never be where he was, where we used to see him. And I would like to extend my sincere condolences to his friends, family, especially his children and his wife. And I wish that I could have met him in person, because I think he must have been the most amazing person. And the way, what really struck me is that his listening. And I learned from Frank, because being on YouTube and being somebody who's very opinionated and who says a lot, Frank always listened more than he spoke, and that's something I'll try to emulate. And I learned from Frank how to do that on the internet. Thank you, Frank. You touched our lives all the way to the southern tip of Africa. Go well, my friend.
Well said.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Mhm.
Okay. Into the drudgery of the news again. So, let me see if I've got my... Oh, lost my document. I closed the wrong one. Silly boy. I'll soon get it. Bear with me. Here we go. So, you remember the Taliban blocked women from attending school, college, and even from helping the NGOs that are delivering charitable assistance, aid to their starving country. Well, that story has been developing. The UN sent a senior female official, deliberately selected for her sex, to confront the Taliban and to encourage them to change their policy. And we since find that the Taliban have planned to draw up new guidelines to allow Afghan women to work in some humanitarian operations. And it's worth remembering that this year, Afghanistan has the biggest humanitarian aid program need in the world ever. And half the population, that's half of 28 million Afghans, are knocking on famine's door. This is in the words of Mr. Griffiths, the UN's Under-Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs. And to make matters worse, this is Afghanistan's coldest winter in a decade, and it's been cruel. In the past 2 weeks, more than 126 Afghans have perished in freezing temperatures.
Well, I mean, so is some headway being made then? Like some serious headway?
There is movement. The Taliban have accepted the need to change their policy. That's all I know.
So they've accepted the need, but they haven't yet done it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, the last
So the thing that I find deeply ironic is I'm sure that the people who are suffering and dying are not only women and female children.
No, of course.
So if they are so keen on banning females that they will allow males to suffer and die so that they can keep women out of offering aid. So I just find it so ironic.
It's I characterize often a lot of religion, but certainly evangelical religions, whether they're Islamic or Christian or whatever, is changing to any form of modernity only after they have exhausted every ability to stop it.
Yeah, that's religion right around the board.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, we'll change with the times, but we'll spend the first 100 or 1,000 years trying to stop what is essentially the inevitable. And so we might laud the Afghani Taliban, if that's something that we can actually even do, for being quote unquote open to making changes. But the reality is that doesn't absolve or dissolve, the thousands and thousands of lives who are lost and damaged and live under fear of religious terrorism that have gone on for centuries.
Yeah. They have to be dragged screaming up to date, don't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Turkey has condemned the burning of a copy of the Quran during a protest in Sweden. They described it as a vile act and said that the Swedish government's decision to allow the protest to go ahead was completely unacceptable. And they can do this because Sweden has applied to join NATO, and Finland has too.
Oh.
Turkey is already a member. So Turkey can block another country from joining. So they're using that to put the screws on for this religious matter.
Again, NATO is, or the UN is, all those guys. It's a secular organization. Keep that crap out of it.
Mm-hmm. Something I want to ask, maybe some of you chaps will be able to enlighten me. So, why is burning a book a particularly vile act? Is the Quran printed on special sacred paper, or because to me that reeks a lot like idol worshipping, because to attach so much value to a physical object, isn't that worshipping false idols? So I'm just wondering about that.
Good
That's
point.
awesome.
I mean, the Muslims do attach an extraordinary amount of worship almost to their Quran. It is quite ridiculous. I sometimes think that perhaps the answer is that we should, somewhere around the world, every day a Quran should be burnt, so that they just get used to it.
Yes. Desensitize and normalize it.
That's it.
Yes, but that's why I'm asking. I mean, because surely it's the message that counts, and you can spread that message. So if I have a Kindle that has the Quran on it, and I destroy it, would that be vile too?
Wow.
Maybe we should get a Muslim on the panel to explain that to us, because yes.
Or
I don't think the Muslim is
conversely,
gonna join this panel.
just pick another book, put a jacket on it that says the Quran, and then burn it. Is it the spirit of burning something like that makes the difference, or the actual burning of?
Let's try that. Let's do that next week.
Yeah.
Well, I
got my
personally
video
am not in
project
favor of book burnings under any circumstance. The symbolism of that being what
you're
it
right,
is,
David.
David, you would totally support book burning if you were like alone in a cabin and needed to stay warm. You'd be like, we have to
Yeah.
this is okay.
Yeah,
Come
it's
on,
like the day after
All right.
tomorrow.
all right.
If I don't pull that out, then we got to stay warm.
Yeah.
Maybe we should burn a copy of Mein Kampf at the same time.
There you go.
Yeah.
So my impression is that I've read the Quran through audio and suffered through that, but the Islamic tradition is that there is an exact copy of the Quran in heaven. Therefore, you can't have higher or lower criticism like you can with Christianity, and so it is revered that it's to them. The Quran and anything but Arabic also is not quite there. So a Quran that's written in Arabic is an exact copy, supposedly, of what's in heaven with God, Allah. And so by doing that, you're attacking, an incredible foundational belief. And they also think that the Quran is so beautiful that in the original that it could not have been written by man because it's so poetic. And of course, then you show them Shakespeare and other things that they don't know about, and that's different. But I think that's where it comes from. Any kind of defacing of that is sacrilege to them, and it's different than other religions.
So the next time the Swedes burn a Quran, they should make sure it's a Swedish translation, because then it won't have any effect.
What?
We didn't catch that, Tercia.
Your audio cut out.
Yeah.
Oh dear. Is it better?
Yeah.
Yes.
I said the next time the Swedes burn a Quran, they must just burn a Swedish translation of it. Then it won't be a vile act.
Yeah.
Just a
Could be.
semi-vile.
That's a good thing.
It's
Yeah.
a semi-vile.
I personally like to see the Quran translated into Klingon.
Ah.
That would make the most
I
interesting.
bet you Chat GBT might be able to do that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know that there was a copy of the Quran in heaven because
Yeah.
is this like uploading to the cloud? I mean, that.
It's the other way around. It was downloaded to Muhammad via the Archangel
It came
Gabriel.
from the cloud, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh.
but I mean, there is a problem with that, and that is that there are something like 30 odd different versions of the Quran in circulation in the world. So, which one is the one in heaven?
Yeah, 30 is not bad considering Christianity Bible variations when you think about it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, there's a huge number of Bible, but no, I mean the Christians aren't particularly bothered, as far as I can make out by that.
Yeah.
But
Well-
for Muslims, it's a critical issue.
Yeah, well,
Oh.
once they finished burning Tyndale at the stake there for translating the
Right,
King James,
exactly.
they were kind of done with it, you know.
Or it's like, well, let me check the time. Looks like it's time for another holy war. I mean, really.
Yeah. I feel I should point out that heaven is actually a gay club in Charing Cross, London.
Oh,
as a
hey, we
dirty
must go there.
I will ask my gay friends to check whether there is a copy of the Quran. Go there.
I like it.
I'll just throw this out of the dirty American capitalist. Every single time you burn a book, someone have had to have bought that book. So like you're only reducing the supply, increasing the demand,
Right.
and the book sold. You know, at the end of the day, it's like, okay, well, we got to keep these printing presses running somehow.
Yeah.
No, but if
The other
you
thing is that burning seems to be a necessary part of this act, doesn't it? You can't dissolve it in acid. It's got to be burning. And if there is a Kindle version, good luck to those who want to set fire to silicon.
Well, does deleting a holy book from your Kindle amount to
No, because you can restore it. You
creation?
can delete it and then restore it back. So
you can
do
restore
it.
it back. Yeah.
Because it's still
It's
tied
a
to your store
miracle.
account. So you can
And I'm-
delete it and just download it again later on.
I'm worried about the audio version too. Does the guy who read it to microphone catch fire?
Yeah.
Because it is the word of God. I mean, that's the issue, isn't it? Whereas the Bible is not the word of God. Most of it isn't, anyway. There are a few quotes, but pretty much that. I think the entire Quran is the word of God, according
So-
to.
Yeah, but also
allegedly.
so is the Book of Mormon, because that was delivered to Joseph Smith by the Golden Tablets.
Well, I think that our bonfire is growing by the minute.
Yeah.
The other thing is, John, I think you make a really good point. It is an act of frustration. It's an act of dissatisfaction to burn a book, because there's a lot of other ways to destroy something. Why not use a vat of acid? And I have read a book where I didn't like it, and so I used it as kindling for barbecue, just because I had it available. But I was figuring, like, you could do other forms of actions to show your dissatisfaction for something. You could take your book out to get ice cream and not buy it any ice cream. Or you can go to like Six Flags and leave it in the parking lot, and you'd have fun. Come back to the parking lot. I had a lot of fun. You just drive back home today with the.
Yeah, rather than burn the book, why didn't they have a public meeting to describe why they objected to the book, why they disagreed with it, why it's wrong?
Exactly. You can buy the book a nice pair of shoes and only compliment its hair. You know, like there's a lot of things you can do with that.
But in sympathy, I know we're parking on the story for quite a while, but I have to say that in sympathy, when I was a devout Christian, so this, I'm not trying to be rude, but I'm one of those people who, when I go to the bathroom for a longer session, then I need to take something to keep my mind occupied. And in the days before cell phones and Kindle, when I was overseas, I didn't have my bookshelf with me, so that one of the only book that I took with me to Greece when I was 18 was my Bible. And one day I was really bored, and I decided, and I actually felt guilty about taking my copy of the Bible into the little girl's room with me and reading it on the ceramic throne.
On the loop.
And so it's very deeply ingrained, that idea that this book has some. So in sympathy for the people. I mean, I was there, so I'm not
Yes.
So
Sacrilege.
Sacrilege. Yep.
Yeah, yes, indeed.
Well, you can
I
be
think-
assured that in 6 billion years, all books will be burned because, of course, the sun will expand to be a red giant, encompass the orbit of the Earth, and all the books will be burned by then. So,
All books on
Yeah, Mohammed won't like that, will he? No. So moving on, the Israeli government, which is the most right-wing fundamentalist religious government in the history of the country, has got rioting going on in all the cities. 110,000 people packed the streets of Tel Aviv, and all the other major cities have rallies with banners calling for an end to the ruling coalition. It's only been in power for, what, 2 or 3 weeks? But already the population is coming out against it. We won't give up until we win, one of the people who addressed the crowd said. The people who love this country came to defend its democracy and its courts. How about that?
Wow.
It sounds as if Israel is as divided politically as sadly many other countries are.
Yeah. I was thinking it sounds an awful lot like Italy, like turn around and like 3 weeks later, there's a new government simply because they're just, as Guy mentioned, totally not cohesive.
Yeah.
But maybe, is it a good sign that people are protesting? Because, and then, does anybody know, as far as I know, the Israeli state is a secular state.
Right.
And that constitutionally, at least. And I would like to maybe do some research on find out how many Israelis are actually religious, not to mention Jewish, because I had this impression that most Israelis are secular. I mean, as in their daily life, that the Jewish population is quite a small part of the Israeli population. Does anybody have any information on that?
well, I do have a friend in Israel. He's a fellow Pastafarian, of course. And Pastafari, Israel is one of the few countries in the world that currently allows, official identification for people to be wearing their tricorns or their colanders in their official documents. Yeah.
Excellent.
Maybe you can ask him to tell us, to give us some information about.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I'm regular contact with him.
Because I always like to find these things out from people who live there on the ground. How devout is the average man on the street?
Yeah, I'll make a note right now.
Think about that. How often do you get to say, why can't we be more like Israel?
Exactly, right? Exactly.
Yeah. I'm not
way
sure
more tolerant
about
of
this.
other. Yeah.
Well, the Israelis are operating an apartheid state, so I'm not
It
sure.
seems to me, as an observer from afar of these situations, that the expat Jews are broadly secular. I mean, if you bump into Jews in Manhattan, for example, David, they're not particularly religious. But the ones who are religious are the ones who went home, as it were, when Israel was created.
Oh, I don't think that's quite right. There are plenty of deeply religious Jews who disagree with Israel, and they haven't gone there.
Yes.
And I'm certainly aware of quite a substantial secular bunch of people in Israel. So I don't know exactly what their percentages are.
Yeah, I mean, look, no group is obviously monolithic, right? So you're right. I mean, if you look at myself as a demographic unit, if you cut me, I bleed pastrami, and I've been an avowed atheist for 60 years. So and I have no connection to any foreign interest. Like I've no interest in going to Israel in terms of quote unquote heritage or some aspects of archaeology interest me, but that I'd much be much more interested in going to South Africa or Canada or wherever, Morocco, than Israel.
Israel.
I've got room in the igloo.
I mean, there are radical Jews, very deeply religious Jews who make it their mission to move to Israel because that's going to usher in end times, right? The whole blood cult is about going back to Israel so God will come back, which is the same reason why evangelical Christians support Israel. For the same reason. It's like we get enough Jews there, God will come back.
Really? I didn't know the story.
Yeah, that's the whole. If you look at why evangelical Christians don't necessarily love Jews, but they really love Israel because it says in the Bible that's what's going to unify having God come back.
Interesting. Wow. John, you were going to say something on this, I believe.
Oh, I was just wondering if anybody can pipe in that. Has anybody labeled in the sociology areas or history this time that we're in where there is the conservative religious movements around the world, Brazil, Hungary, the UK has a conservative issues, certainly America with Trump and McConnell and stuff like that. So we're probably in the sixth extinction period, the Anthropocene. So does anybody know if the historians have already labeled this time where we're taking two steps back with some of the secular and progressive things that have occurred over the last 10 years?
One, I'm not aware of a name, but I can say, in the contrast of history, today is the least power Christian right has had over people, and not so much an exploration of their resurgence, but more of like the death throes and the progressive loss of power, and the more outspoken people who are non-heteronormative, not the right color, not the right race, not the right gender, not the right sex, are being able to speak up and have more freedoms. If anything, I'm just saying, in contrast of how things are, there may not be a name for how Christian things are now, because you look back 20 years, 40 years from now, it was way, way, way more stifling. My thought.
I'd also, if I may offer this up, I subscribe to Skeptic magazine that's published by Michael Shermer. And this latest issue is all about nationalism matters. And so there's a number of articles with respect to different views on nationalism and why the U.S. seems to be so fully ensconced in, this fundamentalist right-wing drive, despite the declining numbers of people who identify with a religion around the world, basically. But I'd turn you on to that. It's a good resource.
Oh, interesting. So, if we're currently in the Anthropocene and enough Jews go back to Israel, will we be in the Rapturocene?
What do you mean? We've been in that every year for the last 2,000 years.
That was a good one, John. 10 out of 10 for that one. Brilliant.
We're still here.
Yeah, I mean, the Anthropocene as a geological epoch only is considered, and it's still controversy. Most people think,
big controversy.
Yeah, we're still in the Holocene. Right. The Anthropocene starts at only the last 150 years.
Right. Yes. Since the Industrial Revolution, right?
Since the Industrial Revolution. But it's interesting because as we see really two movements here, I think, at least, right? These incredible widespread secularization that has gone on across the globe. I mean, there's 1.2 billion people who are non-believers now, and now numbers seem to be growing. And I think later on, John's going to talk about this one article that I shared about the shrinking number of churches and so on. But really, I mean, if you wanted to account for the rise in white nationalism and how it's connected to religiosity and evangelicalism, you really can almost chart it starting as a refutation, a reaction to the civil rights movement, the women's rights movement, and the idea that, wait a second, us white people who have owned the place, quote unquote, for this many years, no longer have, full on power to say what's right or wrong or what's good or bad, and that has leaked into things like the moral majority and all the and it's become so politicized. It started to really become politicized in the late 70s and with Reagan, but it continues to today to be even more radicalized. I mean, how else do you get a Marjorie Taylor Greene in Congress, who is espousing conspiracy theories, proud of her ignorance? It's the politicization of this ultra right wing orthodoxy, and it is a danger. But that's why we need people like all of us in wherever we are to stand up to. I'll stop talking now.
Yeah, I was going to just make one point too, is that rather than even introducing an Anthropocene, we just go from the Holocene to the Holocene.
Well, hopefully that will be a very short period of time.
Right.
Okay, so thanks everyone. And so I think the bottom line was what we're witnessing now is probably or hopefully a backlash for the changes that are occurring, and that it'll hopefully be short-lived in terms of the span of the earth. We may not see the golden time when it's washed out. Teresa obviously is younger than some of us, but and also Ty, but I may not see it come to fruition where it's finally buried, but at least that's what we probably can look forward to. So thanks.
There's another thing interesting. I'll link it and I'll send it in, but basically there is a timeline of life and perspective that has trends that go with it. Like, for example, when you're a kid, you think everything's awesome. And then as you get exposed to more accesses for information, you begin to see a world in its truer colors. And so there's a period of where skepticism starts to come up, and it either take you to a point where that skepticism makes you a bit more cynical than usual, and that colors your view of the world. And then you seem to overcome it, maybe like in your 20s, you get a lot of freedom, like just the way how Western life is. Everyone tends to go through a trend. I would say there's a point in time where you have, there's a mentality where it's like, the world is getting worse because that's just how I feel. It's not the only, I would say like this, you're not the only one who could feel that way. What I would say is, for the world is getting worse, that age, there's a brand new generation where they see potential and good things happening.
Right.
And it's not that one person has a rose-colored glass lens on and the other one has like a dim-colored lens. It's because they're looking at different things and it can color their appreciation. And I can say that for every weird, crazy Marjorie Taylor Greene, there's new black representatives in Congress that are there's a new woman who's willing to speak up. There's a new Speaker of the House. There's new conversations going on that have never been discussed before in that political household.
Well, I hope you're right.
Don't dismiss it for the good stuff or bad stuff.
I'd hate to think that humanity is in its teenage right now. Yeah. So you may remember that the Church of England, last week, the bishops of the Church of England, that's not the whole community of the Anglican Church, which is worldwide, but the bishops of England and Wales decided that they were prepared not to marry gay people, but they would generously confer upon them the blessings of God after they'd been married. Well, a development on that is the Archbishop, Justin Welby, has said, not me. I'm not willing to use the new prayers to bless the the gays after they've been married, because he has a responsibility for the whole communion. So he's got to sort of stay on the fence.
I would like to ask, is there any gay person anywhere who cares about that blessing?
There are.
Yeah, there are. Strangely enough.
Okay.
I've
Okay.
always been amazed that there are gay people who retain their religious belief, but they
yes.
do exist. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Well, and
There are gay priests in
Yes.
the Church of England.
Yes,
Probably
quite a
the
lot.
most famous one is the one who appears on the radio every week.
Yes,
What's his name? I've forgotten his name. Oh, Richard Coles.
that's the one. Yeah.
Yeah, and he lives with his partner, or partner died now, but interestingly enough, officially, at least they didn't have sex together, as I understand it.
but why? If he's a gay priest, confer the blessing onto himself and his partner.
I mean, the interesting thing there is obviously, as Justin Welby has to try and keep the Anglican communion together, which is deeply split between people who want to accept gays and people who don't, who think it, and it will, I suspect there will be a split at some stage. But meantime, the Pope has actually sort of warmed up to gays. On another issue, you might have mentioned later.
Yes, I do.
He calls for an end to anti-gay laws. Well, he can start with the Roman Catholic Church, can't he?
Right.
Yes, in fact, you're right. I'll go straight to that item. Pope Francis has criticized laws that criminalize homosexuality as unjust, saying God loves all his children just as they are, and calling on Catholic bishops who support the laws to welcome LGBTQ plus people into the church. So, being a homosexual isn't a crime, Francis said, but he does refer to it as a sin.
Hey, I've spent many years debating recently evangelicals here in the United States on this, and having some science background and a retired physician, I went and looked up what the data was on the actual scientific basis for homosexuality. And in males, it's extremely strong. I have a new website where I put up 27 different studies and observations, which, I mean, a lot of the gays know, especially the men, that they're gay at age 3 or 5, I mean, so it's biological. So the latest track for me is I present these to my pastor friends and evangelicals, and at the end they're a little speechless. But what they usually come down to is say that they want to have their Bible and their gay friends too. So what they say is that it's still a sin, but if you keep your homosexuality to yourself, you abstain from being who you are or doing any kind of activities, therefore you won't be sinning even though you're gay. And so my comeback is always saying, look, it's a core identity issue with this person. This is who they are. So their evangelicals are usually into authenticity and identifying with who you are, et cetera. And so they don't seem to have any cognitive dissonance with that. So if you're a Christian, you can be gay, just don't act on it. Never mind that you have to completely ignore who you are and your core identities. But that's where we are. It's an amazing list I've put together. It's so innate, or not innate. It's biological, whether it's hormonal or
it's evolutionary. There's an evolutionary component. Because you see homosexual behavior in species that are not human.
Yes.
Exactly. I was going to comment on that.
Right.
And so we are biological beings, obviously, and I always share this with my students when I talk about sex and gender in the classes. It's like, well, if this is part of our code, our genetic code, and how we're formed or whatever, the reality is that we are part of nature, and this is an evolutionary component that not only expresses itself in human want. We define it as love because of our brains or whatever, or desires. But you see homosexuality in chimpanzees. You see it in elephants. You see it
Dolphins.
as not only just for like dominance and things like that, but for comfort. You even see it in flies, for goodness sake. So I mean, we don't even have to be talking about the same group or family. It doesn't even have to be mammals. It seems like homosexuality, as being defined as a part of the organic nature of life.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
So
one more thing is that it occurs every generation. There's like 10% of the population.
Mhm.
So it's not only 1,000 different species out there, 400 mammal species have homosexuality, that it persists, which means that natural selection is selecting for it. And there are even studies that show that women who have gay men have higher success and fitness in terms of reproduction, et cetera. So there's reasons why it's biological, shows up every generation, persists. And like David said, it's in 1,000 different species, 400 different mammal species. So the point is that it is not unnatural. It is not a sin. It's not a choice. And the church has got a real problem because they're correct. The Bible paints it as a problem. And so luckily the new generation coming up, the nuns, can see the problem, and the problem's not with science.
Yeah.
I might have a solution.
Yeah.
Just quickly, I might have a solution for these Anglican priests who don't want to say the blessing. So the fundamentalist congregation that I grew up in, for many years it was not allowed to dance in any way. No dancing was allowed. And then when sort of times change and generations change, and then there was sort of this idea that you're not supposed to dance, but if you do dance, it's not just such a great sin as long as you don't enjoy it. So can the priest say the blessing and just say he's not enjoying it?
That's good. Yeah. Well, I was going to suggest
like
that these priests and pastors who are gay shouldn't read the Bible because that's not going to be enjoyable for them.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing is that while the Archbishop of Canterbury has said he's not personally going to do any blessing of gays, certainly not, the Archbishop of York has come against him, saying he will offer the new prayers because he believes it puts the church in a better place. And he became quite fearful on camera.
Wait, did you say that he came against him? What did you say?
I'm going to edit that. I'm definitely going to edit that out.
Naughty
Your part
David.
of
You naughty boy.
Okay, moving on. As David said, things have been happening in the US. A couple of things happened. You remember Hamlin University fired, using the American expression, an adjunct professor who, in her history of art lesson, displayed a picture of Muhammad with his face visible.
An Islamic picture, not just a picture, but one from their own culture.
From history, yes, indeed. And she was fired on the grounds of being Islamophobic. Well, the update is she has been the accusations have been retracted, and although the university hasn't renewed her contract yet, they have come out saying that the accusation that she's Islamophobic wasn't appropriate. And the interesting thing about this is they did it on the same day that the professor herself sued the university. Religious
Can I say something about
defamation.
John? I want to say something about this because it's interesting. I listened to the Bart Ehrman, one of the Bart Ehrman podcasts, and I actually heard the details of this case. And what I found extremely preposterous was that this particular lecturer, weeks before she was going to give this lecture, she put out a notice to the students that she was going to display this picture. And she said that if there are any Muslim students who might feel that they will get treated, they must please not come to that lecture. It was sort of, it wasn't, so the person who laid the complaint was told in advance that there was going to be this picture, and he didn't have to go to the class. It wasn't something that would be tested on. And despite that, that person deliberately went to the class, pressed the charges, and obviously the university took, in my opinion, the wrong action. And that just brings me back to the very first story about the Taliban banning the female aid workers. It was a male student who pressed the charges, and that person literally went out of their way to get this person into trouble. All the steps by the lecturer to handle this matter in the best possible way. So there's a real vindictiveness in the mindset, and I didn't know that. So it just makes it worse. What happened?
So she has a partial victory anyway. They've retracted their accusations from her. They haven't yet given her job back.
She won't need a job. She'll sue. For slander and defamation, which she'll win because they did slander and defamation and defame her.
And there should be consequences to the person that reported it.
What's that?
There should be consequences to the person that made the allegation.
Yes.
Yeah, the president came out and said this faculty member is Islamophobic and we can't say. When of course, as Tertia mentioned, all these fail-safes were put into place for her class, let's hope that this does serve as a lesson.
Yeah,
but even isn't it the case that also though that having to put these things in place is really over the top already?
Yes,
absolutely. There is no one. No one has the right not to be offended. And that's the essence of religious freedom, or the freedom from religion, is that nobody's beliefs are infallible, and certainly not. Yes, they're not free of criticism. That's what the bottom line is.
Right.
I'd like to ask the Pope, what's the difference between a crime and a sin, and is there any overlap there? I mean. Who has the supremacy here? Is it God's laws or human laws?
It's God's laws. I mean, really, the Catholic Church can do whatever they want on earth. So it is definitely God's laws. I can answer that for you. I don't
You're putting yourself up for a very tired church sermon if you ask that, John.
Except that he does seem to be saying that it's okay to go against God's sin because it's not a crime to be gay, doesn't he? So it sounds to me as though he's stepping on the other side of that option.
Oops, I was wrong. I'm sorry, I was wrong. It
I wonder if he's trying to play a sort of subtle game of supporting secular rights in a secular context while still maintaining the church's ban. It's very odd. We'll see what happens to the Pope now.
This is the corruptible nature of religion just in general. I mean, it took them, 700 years to apologize to Galileo?
Yes, indeed.
It took them 150 years to apologize to Darwin. It's so low and go. So they'll keep moving the marker, but keep that ridiculousness of the theology going when it has smaller and smaller places in
Did you guys know? Did you know that the idea that the Pope is infallible is a fairly recent idea? I mean, talking 200 or 300 years in the development of the Catholic Church. I was always under the impression that this was a very old idea, but it wasn't. It's quite a new doctrine in the Catholic Church. So maybe it's got something.
1861, I think it is.
Yeah. Hey, John, just a quick comment about your archbishops trying to have their gays and keep their Bible too. It's not the first time Catholicism has done that, because look at marriage and divorce. So they will accept a divorce civilly, that recognize it in terms of the country and the secular, but they will not recognize it, the divorce as viable in the church, which is why they annul it, that it never really happened in the eyes of God, even though it happened in the courts. And so, they've done this before.
Yeah. Once married under God, always married. Yeah. But it seems to me,
I will confess that I was actually on my way to being a Catholic priest, and because I had been married, that was exactly what was going to happen, John. Was that the church was going to annul my marriage because I wasn't married in the church. I was married through a justice of the peace. So they were willing to annul that and pave the way for me to head to Rome.
Well, I'm shocked. I thought it was the pasta and the noodles and things that got you.
But the interesting thing about this is Francis said, and this is a quote, being homosexual isn't a crime, but later on he said that it's a sin. He referred to the issue in terms of sin. So I think he's trying to face both ways. And I would recommend not turning your back on him.
Right.
Oh my. Don't pick up that rope on a rope, right?
Well, we've lost Tertia.
Tertia's broken. Yes, oh dear. Maybe it was something she said. I don't know.
Maybe it was a brownout.
Yes. So the last item is a piece of good news, and I want to hand this over to David because he referred it to me. It's about churches closing in rapid numbers in the US. Mm-hmm. What do you have to say about that?
Well, this was a great article that I wanted to share with the group. It came out a couple of weeks ago, and it showed that there's a real transformation and consolidation going on in most of the Abrahamic religions, and that the physical place for worship is just not sustainable. That model is no longer sustainable in the United States. You have parishes closing, you have consolidation, you have the number of people in any particular given neighborhood as migration patterns change. People of different faiths, and certainly no faiths, are coming into neighborhoods. And what you're finding is that these buildings, just like the trend in Europe to have so many of these buildings empty, is happening in the United States, and happening incredibly rapidly now. And it's not just the secular. It's not just a secular observation. You can look at the Vatican has a statistics office, and they have these same statistics on faith and faithness, and the number of nuns going into the convent and the number of priests going into the priesthood. All those numbers are going down, and consequently, if you don't have enough priests, well, then you got to consolidate churches, and then you got to consolidate parishes. And so, as a business model, you're seeing. I wouldn't necessarily call it Chapter 13, as they say, or Chapter 11, but you're definitely seeing the physical changes, pro-secularism, pro the nuns, happening in the United States. And now, granted, it's not everywhere, right? Because if you go to the Bible Belt, it's alive and well. But everywhere else, you find that this is happening.
Amen to that. Right? So, Tertia, has sent me a message because she's got load shedding, as you suspected. And she says, look after yourself, please. You are my online friends. That's sweet.
Right.
Wait,
Oh, that's nice.
hold on. Isn't she only 50? Why is she load shedding?
Add an interesting correlation I want to throw out. The rapid number of closing churches also seems to coincide with the dramatic increase to access of information that kids have as well.
Yeah.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
On that note, guys, thank you very much. You've been wonderful. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Several clergy
Was the Pope appealing for peace, or was he praying for peace?
And the same applies to the Kaliningrad.
Yeah, that's a good question. So what do you have to say about that, guys? Well, there you go. We did it again.
Yeah.
Started out very sad.